to start things today, we wanted to, again, say thanks to everybody for being here. Hope you have your copy. I have mine. And to kick things off, we wanted to first talk to and hear from the editor-in-chief, Valerie Grissom. Valerie has worked tirelessly on working with authors and publishers to get everything together. So I want to give her a few minutes here at the beginning just to talk about the project as a whole. You may or may not realize this, but this is the third volume in the Intergenerate Conference series. And so, Valerie, to begin, talk a little bit about how this book is like the two previous books, and then how you feel like this book is different.
Well, first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to celebrate with us today. This really is a day of celebration. This is the fruit of 16 authors from around the world that have given of themselves and written from their context, from their different places, academics, practitioners, people of the church, people in seminaries, people from all over the world, giving us this beautiful, diverse group of voices to make what we have now in this book called All Ages Becoming. And I just want to celebrate you all today. That's why we're here today. And God is so faithful to bring us to completion of this book. So I am so grateful to God for that today. And as far as what is different and the same, first of all, the main thing is this really is a continuation of the work of Intergenerate from the Intergenerate Conference 2021. This is a continuation of our mission to bring the generations of the church together. And so this continues that conversation. And that conversation goes around the world in different ways and looks different for different people, but it brings it all together for us. What is maybe different about this book from the other two is that we started asking a new question. We asked, how do our intergenerational practices form us in becoming the people of God? And we defined intergenerational practices in the book, and I'd like to read that definition word for word. So it is, intergenerational practices are intentionally shared rhythms and patterns of participation in Christian community that foster relationships with God among all ages and help us mutually honor God and one another for the sake of becoming more like Christ. So for us, this book was about examining our theology, reimagining our practices, all those things, but it's centered around this idea of intergenerational Christian practice and how that enables us to become the people of God. And the other thing that I think that was maybe a little different and that we're really excited about is something we wanted that our theology to not just be theoretical, but something that we could put into practice. And so at the end of every chapter, there is a group of questions. We called it theology in practice because we wanted to take our theology and practice it because the whole book is about practice. So you'll find those as a great way to engage with yourself, with God, and with people and community as you ask these questions of how can we take what has been written and apply it to our own context. Wilson, I think
to get us started. Yeah, sorry about that. We're really glad that we have several of the authors here, and I'm going to turn it over to Amy. But I just want to draw your attention to the comments. We are going to be giving some free books away, and the authors are going to be invited to engage in some questions. So you can do that in the chat. But Amy, let's get into interviewing some of the authors.
Thank you, Wilson. I'm so excited. I finally speak with Rachel in person. I mean, like over the screen. as Gareth as well. Rachel Turner, she contributed chapter 5, the church's role in restoring parents as central to discipleship. And she's the founder of Parenting for Faith and has worked in churches in the UK for over 15 years as a family life pastor, children's pastor, and youth pastor. She continues to consult, speak of conferences, and run training days for church leaders, parents, and family around the world. Rachel is the author of 9 books, as well as Parenting for Faith course. Gareth Crispin. And he contributed chapter 3, Lucidity and Theology, exploring some theological foundation of intergenerational ministry. And he has his PhD and a lecturer in practical theology at Cliff College in UK, where he is program director for the BA in Mission and Ministry. He writes, publishes, and teaches across a wide range of subjects in youth, children, and family ministry, but has a particular focus on intergenerational ministry. And in his PhD thesis from the University of Manchester, UK, was on impediments and encouragements into intergenerationality and family ministry. He serves on the executive board of International Association for the Study of Youth Ministry and is co-director of Generation, the Cliff College Center for Study of Youth, Children, Family, Mission, and Ministry. My tongue is tired reading the background and bio of my two authors, and I'm excited to listen from you guys and learn from you guys as well. And my question to you is, like, what experiences inspire you to write this chapter? I believe that there's always like some motivation, some special insight or inspiration causes you to write. And maybe I'll ask Rachel first, lady first.
Yeah. For me, I think I was passionate about intergenerational ministry and passionate about parents being the primary disciplers of their kids. And at the beginning, I was treating them as two separate things. Like we have our intergenerational space, and then we have the at-home space. And I was treating them separately. And I really began to be challenged that we were leaving parents sort of just dangling and ignoring their role when we were in an intergenerational setting. So for me, the experience was parents are walking in and saying, I'm a parent and a member of this congregation. Who am I supposed to be here? And how am I doing family within an intergenerational community? And so that got me really passionate about looking at this work.
That's great. That's great. How about Gareth?
Hi, Amy. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I guess my experience and motivation came out of a frustration. I think a lot of our thinking comes out of frustrations in church life. I'd read on the theory of IG, but I was wondering why we were struggling, myself and friends I knew, struggling to put it into practice in the local churches we were part of. So I wanted to research that, and I committed to research 3 churches in the Anglican tradition in the UK, Church of England, and to look at what difficulties people were facing in kind of embracing IG. Why was it that people were finding it so hard? And that led me to conclude that a significant part of the problem, and this is what my chapter is about in the book, a significant part of the problem lies in churches not understanding how their underlying theology, the basic foundational theology they hold, how that impacts their practices. Now, I'm never going to say that we should change our theology pragmatically simply because of what it gives us. But I was struck by the connections between underlying foundational theology, like your doctrine of the Trinity or the Spirit, and action, how those two connect to practices. So I'm not sure I have an inspiration, but certainly a motivation. That kind of struggling to implement, or failing even to implement IG, was instrumental for me and really drove me to dig down into that kind of question of underlying theology. That's really what it was at for me.
Yeah. Actually, I hear both of you. Actually, I hear a word vision from Rachel, and I heard the word frustration from Gareth, because I think all these things can drive us to do something, and instead of just sitting there. And thank you so much. And I believe that all these emotions, or God open our eyes to see, and so that we can do more and make changes and bring it to the next level. What about this? I believe that it's not just you see something and you want to contribute for others, but also, how does this writing of the chapter impact your own life and vision of ministry in your context? I think it's coming back, you want to pour out on others, but then now you probably receive something through this process. Rachel, you're first lady first.
Sure, sure. I guess first of all, I feel like I have to call it IG now because Gareth sounds so cool when he says it. And so I think that IG is really cool around the world for me. And so I do a lot of work in Scandinavia. I just got to spend a month in Australia. And for me, I think it's more and more looking at the different ways, different cultural contexts, experience family, experience intergenerational ministry. And it just gives me a lens to learn more from every place I go and every cultural place that I'm in to sort of see what does it look like to center parents within an intergenerational space, and what can parents learn from intergenerational community, what can intergenerational community input into parents, and how can we as practitioners learn from each other across countries. I've taken away so much from what I've learned, and being able to write this chapter is just another way of articulating. There's general principles that can apply in so many different cultural contexts. It's not just one size fits all. This is the practice and you do it. It really is about getting the principles and learning what different cultures do excellently and how we can all raise our game in doing intergenerational well. But every cultural context will have its own strengths in this, and we get to learn from each other in that.
Absolutely, I do agree. Before I turn into to Gareth, I do agree with you, Rachel, because I'm from trilingual context, and as I'm reading everything that, like, even written by any monoculture context, I'm still can transfer some of the concepts and principles and expand it or even applied it. Yeah, that's great. How about Gareth? You're not a new.
Sorry, just really, I know Rachel, and I'm just so interested every time she talks. I was confused about what I was supposed to be doing. I'm actually supposed to be speaking sometimes too. Sorry. Yeah, I guess the frustration that I mentioned at the beginning, that's still something that I experience now. I guess like a lot of people maybe on the call today, I'm not a senior minister, and that limits the amount of kind of responsibility and authority that I have in the local church. So from my perspective, the chapter especially that I wrote helps me to, I guess what I might call my advocacy, within the church, rather than sort of focusing just on implementation. I don't necessarily have that responsibility and authority. So it does fuel my advocacy. I mean, one of the other findings or conclusions from my research, which wasn't a part of the chapter, but it's another piece of my thinking, is the way in which the underlying theology of the leader and their experiences as a leader and their personalities really influences whether they are up for IG or not. So that's really something that I'm taking now into different contexts. So it's not that I can say, oh yeah, look, it's given me this amazing vision which I'm able to implement, but it definitely does, if you like, inform and fuel my advocacy for IG.
You know what? I will conclude both of your responses with one word: discovery. Both of you discover something new through this process, and you learn from it. And I think that is such a blessing for you and for those who read your book. One last thing that I'm interested is, like, what is one practical intergenerational tip that you want to offer to people who are attending our book launch party? And because like they actually are very interested in learning from you guys, but why don't you bring one tip to us? And this time I'll ask the gentleman first.
Thanks, Amy. For me, it would be sell the vision first. I think you can do things around the edges and implement things, but I think unless you sell a vision, you're going to struggle. And I say this as somebody who has struggled and failed to implement IG because of, that drove me to my research. I mentioned the frustrations and the need for advocacy. And so I think it's all about selling the vision first and having that idea of, this is what God wants for the church. Actually, this is a big vision for who we are as the people of God. And I think capture the hearts of people with that vision, and then you can have a conversation about how.
Yeah, I believe that's a very good beginning. And selling, it's a big thing, and all of us needs to learn some marketing skills first. What about you, Rachel?
For me, it's equipped parents are the missing cog. So many times when you're trying to do IG, it sometimes feels like it's just not working or it's feeling clunky. And for me, the thing that I just want to hold up is equipped parents are that missing cog. Having parents who know how to disciple their kids, how to facilitate their kids engaging in intergenerational community, who know how to worship alongside discipling. Equipped parents are that missing cog that you have. And so invest in not just telling parents what to do, but equipping them to be disciplers in intergenerational community.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for narrowing some audience for us. I think like a lot of times that we want to sell to people, but then we're there's too many people in our church or in our context that like we want them to have the attention, but like parents are so important. They are the primary educator, making the biggest influence. And I have read a research that like 30 years ago, they did a research on like who are the most influential people. That was parents. And after 30 years, they did the same research, it's still parents. So I believe that even moving forward to the next 30 years, maybe they're same people. So when we are selling this vision, don't forget parents. And now I think like we want to talk to you guys more, but our time is up, and I like to turn to Wilson. Wilson has more guests to interview for us. Wilson, thank you so much, Rachel and Gareth.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks to those authors. We wanted to spend our next few minutes speaking with an individual who actually kicks off the book. The very first chapter in the book was written by Linda Staats, and that book chapter is called Circle of Blessing, Foundation and Fundamentals for Intergenerational Ministry. And at the end of our session, Linda's actually going to lead us in something experiential. And I ask you to hang on till the end. I think you'll be blessed by that. Let me tell you a little bit about Linda. She's a favorite person of mine. We were on the Intergenerate conference team together, and she's done so much work. And kind of currently, she's a national speaker, workshop leader, curriculum writer, author, consultant, leadership coach, and founder of Homegrown Faith. She has an MS degree in human development in the family with minors in child development and gerontology. So she brings a lifetime lens span to this conversation. Her passion and approach to all age interaction is reflected in the resource, The Generosity Project, which is an intergenerational approach to discipleship and stewardship. Linda's held positions in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. She's served as assistant to the bishop for 2 regional ELCA offices, and she's a coordinator for faith formation and household ministry in a large metropolitan congregation. She and her extended family represent 6 living generations. I love getting to spend time with Linda. I got to see her a couple of months ago at our Intergenerate conference, and am honored to get to ask her a couple of questions to share a little bit about her chapter and the origin of it. And that's really where I want to start, Linda, is tell us a little bit about the experiences that led you to write this chapter on Circle of Blessing.
Yeah, thank you, Wilson. I think as I shared in the first chapter, when I grew up, I was surrounded by grandparents and great-grandparents. I had a great-grandmother that lived to be 102, and my other grandparents were in their 90s, and they all lived within 7 miles of where I lived. In our small little town where we had the white steeple church with faithful elders that, quote, meddled in my life. I couldn't get by with anything. In this little town, everybody knew my name, and I just thought that was natural. It was just natural to interact with people from all ages that were part of my life. And then when I started teaching in a community college in a metro area, I discovered to my surprise that that was not the norm for most of our young adults, that they did not have that many caring adults that were in their life. And so that is actually what inspired me, was my own personal experience. But what motivated me was a book that I read in 1997. It was written by Peter Benson, who at the time was president of Search Institute. And I literally, it became branded in my head. And this is his quote: "Religious institutions are one of the few remaining intergenerational communities to which kids have access. Yet congregations as intergenerational community represent potential rather than reality, since most communities of faith are as age segregated as the rest of society. So that became, quote, my rallying cry and career focus, basically, to change potential into reality, so that our communities and our households of faith could be more intergenerational and celebrate all ages and the gifts that they bring.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to kind of play off that and ask you, when we talk about blessing and talk about your chapter, what some of the practical ways, or maybe practical way you could see that being lived out. We've got a lot of ministry leaders listening in and tuning in. So do you have any practical tips for us as leaders of what this could look like in our communities?
Yeah, I think what I address, and the chapter again is very basic, and it's based on, I would say, my 40 some years of just doing this. People often ask, well, Linda, were you trained as a teacher? And it's like, oh my gosh, there's nothing scarier for me than the idea of me being a single adult with a group of kids. It's like, no, but bring their parents and bring the grandparents and bring other caring adults, and we'll just do all of this together, this messiness of everybody coming together. So for me, the key, and really what the tips are about in this kind of foundational first chapter, is the idea of facilitation. That it's not a teaching role, it's how do we facilitate? And there is some organization, around that. So I think just the idea of being intentional. So if there were two words, it would be facilitation skill and the idea of being intentional. And for me, the goal of that first chapter is I want everyone to be successful. When somebody comes to me and say, Linda, I tried this stuff. I tried this IG thing and it didn't work. And as we talk about it, often it was like they just thought naturally people would, go to and talk to someone of another generation. And that's just not always the case, that people gravitate to who they already know or their little cohort. So the idea of being intentional of how we do that. And I think we're going to do some things at the very end that'll demonstrate that as well.
Thanks so much. I want to turn it over to Valerie. She's got an additional question for you, and then we'll keep moving.
Yeah, today we are asking some of the people as we go through for intergenerational gem, which we're calling, Don, who cannot be here, one of our teammates, called it the North Guiding Star of Intergenerational Ministry, or like a high mileage suggestion or idea. And so we've been naming it the intergenerational gem, and we're going to be asking that from several people today. And so Linda, you're our first person, but if you have a gem you'd like to share in the chat, some of you, I'm looking on the screens and know that some of you have been doing this far longer than I have and have intergenerational gems to offer us, and we're saving all this chat. And so we would love to hear your gems as well. But Linda, did you have a short gem that you'd like to share with us?
I think, Valerie, as you mentioned at the very start, it'll be messy, but we'll try it at the very end. But as the title of the chapter refers to, it's called The Circle of Blessing. And I know there's some people on our Zoom call today that know me, and I've been with you. I never gather with people, it doesn't matter whether it's in a faith community or in our neighborhood, that I'll say, who's the oldest here? I'm 75. Is there anybody here older than me? And hopefully there is. And we'll, acknowledge and celebrate the gifts that generation or decade brings. And then who's the youngest? And often we'll bring those together, whether it's that baby to meet this 82-year-old, maybe they know each other, maybe they don't, but they become what we call the bookends. And then calling up who else is in their 80s or 90s, who's in their 70s, 60s, 50s. And we call it this circular, becoming part of this life-giving circle where we're a blessing, finding your place in that ongoing relationship, that intergenerational circle that gives life. And in the chapter, I refer to some Native American indigenous wisdom of giving thanks for those who came before us and those who come after us, that this isn't something that's just, static, but it's ongoing. So again, we'll see what that looks like when we're on Zoom at the end.
Thank you, Linda. So thank you, Linda, so much for sharing your gem with us. We are so glad that you could join us. And like I said, we'll be experiencing this at the end of our time together. And now I'd like to invite Chris Barnett, if he is here. I saw him on the chat. He is here. Chris Barnett, who is Executive General Manager of Intergen from Australia. And it is very early in the morning, his time. We welcome you here as one of our guests today. And he was formerly leader of the Uniting Church Synod of Victoria and Tasmania, but now is at Intergen. And he is a resource for many of us. If you aren't on his email list, you should be, because he has all kinds of great resources every month to hand out intergenerational gems. And I asked Chris if you would share an intergenerational gem with us today while you're here as well. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Valerie, for such a generous introduction. Thank you. Yeah, just great to see so many faces so early in my morning. Earlier on in your definition, Valerie, you mentioned the word relationship. Often I say ministry is about three things: relationship, relationship, relationship. And at the heart for me of being intergenerational and intergenerational ministry is relationship with those who are different to us in terms of age. So to frame being intergenerational primarily in terms of relationship, for me, is the key. It's fantastic, as Gareth said, to be able to cast a vision. It's wonderful to have a theoretical background. It's important to have practical application. But I've discovered that as soon as you can help people think about the intergenerational experiences and environments they're already part of and being blessed by, the more open they are to start to experience intergenerational ministry. So whether it's individuals or boards or councils, whoever, as soon as they can be drawn back into where intergenerationality has been a blessing for them already in their home, if in their extended family, maybe in their church, to assist them in naming that, recognizing that, and then asking the question, how can there be more of that in your church life? Then for me, that's the key. I'm going to keep that. That's brevity. Hopefully that's a minute.
It's a great gem. Thank you so much for sharing, Chris. So thankful for all that you bring to Australia and to us here, and just thankful that you could be a part of this party today. And it is a gem always to hear from you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So now we are headed towards our first book giveaway. So I am going to turn the screen over to my son, who is here. My son, Bjorn, is going to be spinning the wheel.
All right, let me share my screen. All right, and I think I have everybody. Okay, all right. Drum roll, please. Let's spin the wheel. All right, congratulations. You won a free book. Please send me a message in the chat with your email and we can hook you up with your free book.
That's fun. We could have do that all day long, and that would be fun for me. So I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Bjorn. We are going to keep moving on to our discussion of and with the next author. But first, some of you know this. This book that we're celebrating today doesn't stand in isolation. It actually emerges from a conference that is held every other year. It started in 2017. Somebody might fact check me on that date, but every other year for the last many years, Intergenerate Conference has been a place to gather people who are interested in this way of being the church and the way of doing ministry. It's been a real blessing to my life to get to be at those conferences, get to be a part of the books, and we wanted to spend just a couple of minutes with a few others who are on the current leadership team to talk a little bit about why the conference has been important to them. We are planning for a conference in 2025, and we are very close to finalizing dates, and we'll let you know about that. But I was going to invite, let's see here, Amy, Valerie, or whomever else from the team who has logged in. Tell us a little bit about why the Intergenerate Conference matters to you, and then we'll keep talking to authors.
So back to me. Valerie, do you want to say something about the Intergen Conference?
I can start. I am so grateful for the Intergenerational Conference. I remember in 2017 was my first time that I presented. I met Holly, and that has been really a pivotal thing in my life and ministry, and I'm very thankful. But I think my favorite thing about the conference is meeting all of you, all of the different voices and people that help us envision what intergenerational ministry could look like in our diverse contexts. And I think that's what I love about this book, is that it reflects not just my voice, but voices from all over, people doing it in different ways, how God is working in our communities. And so I'm thankful for the work of intergenerational ministry. And I think Intergenerate that's what we're all about. So.
Great, Valerie. I can't agree more. Like it's so to me personally, it's an answer to my prayers, and I felt the same as Gareth. For many years that I was so frustrated about the situation. I didn't know what to do, and until that, like I read the book and also went into 2021 actually, like the online one, that online Intergen conference, and then I start, wow, the world is so big, and everyone that globally involved in this communication and advocate for intergenerational ministry. And I personally learned so much, and I feel so blessed to be part of it. And so now I think like I'm ready to interview more guests, and I'm excited for the next two, because one of them is also from Intergen team, and I'm going to put off later to introduce Wilson McCoy, but I would like to introduce a new friend, Robert Pendergraft, and nice to meet you, Robert. First time on screen, and Robert contributed Chapter 7, Building Ramps Instead of Stairs, Universal Design in Planning Intergenerational Worship. By looking at the title, already draw my attention. I personally love design and interior design particularly. And how can it turn into be a concept? And we're going to listen from you very soon, but I would like to read your bio. Robert joined the University of Mary Hardin Bay faculty in the fall of 2016, where he currently serves as associate professor, and James and Leonard Hagen, chair of the church music, an ordained Southton Baptist minister. And Robert's passion is getting the entire congregation actively participating in corporate worship. He carries out the passion weekly as the associate pastor of music ministry in the First Baptist Church of Salendo. Robert holds bachelor and master degrees in music education from Samford University in Birmingham, and the Doctor of Philosophy degree in church music from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. Robert was the recipient of the inaugural scholar grant from Calvin Institute for Christian Worship in 2019, and he previously served as president of Southton Baptist Church Music Conference and is on the steering. Wow, you know what? Again, like it's really a lot of exposure, a lot of like ministry experience and teaching experience, and I believe that we can learn from you. And I also want to introduce my next guest, Wilson McCoy. And he said Linda was his favorite, and Wilson, you are one of my favorites. Wilson wrote Chapter 2, Honoring the Image, Recovering a Creational Theology for Intergenerational Ministry. And he holds a doctorate of ministry, served as minister at the College Hills Church of Christ in Lebanon, Tennessee. Over the last 12 years with this church, some of his responsibility has included working with young adults, preaching, teaching, adult formation, and small groups. Before College Hills, Wilson worked with churches in Tennessee, Texas, and Australia. His doctorate of ministry with Lipscomb University focused on intergenerational spiritual formation. That work resulted in a contributing chapter to the book Intergenerate, Transforming Churches Through Intergeneration Ministry. And Wilson continued to write, speak, consult with churches interested in intergenerational ministry. You can find more and connect with Wilson. And Wilson, I want you to know the book that you contributed in 2017, am I correct, the date? 2017, that was becoming a gift for my ordination. I actually intentionally asked the church, instead of buying me Bible, I have lots of Bible. So instead of buying me a Bible, I want them to buy me an intergenerational book. So actually the book has a and the first page, it says like, oh, blessed you for your ordination day and all these things. So all of you guys that who wrote the book and part of the contributors, that you are part of contributing and celebrating with me on my ordination. So now I don't want to take up more time, but I want to ask both of you, what experiences inspire you to write this book? Again, it's like what motivates you and what comes into your mind in the first place. Robert, your turn first.
Great, thank you so much. I think for me, the inspiration came from the idea of intersections. I'm in the classroom at a college many days of the week. I'm leading worship in a congregation on Sundays and had a great interest in intergenerational worship and also began branching out into working with varied disabilities in worship planning. And so one of the things where all three things seem to converge was in the area of universal design. And so I thought, why silo, right, the different things that I'm doing when there's clear opportunities for convergence? And so this chapter is really born out of that idea of convergence between the areas of intergenerational worship, the idea of working with varied abilities in worship, and then also being in a classroom.
And I think this is so connected to your own calling, how you want to offer your insights and the worship bring to the entire congregation. And that is like a driving force for you. Thank you so much. Wilson, what about you?
Yeah, for me, I have over the last several years thought about scripture in the context of intergenerational ministry, and one of my core theological convictions that's developed has been rooted in a Genesis 1-2 understanding of the story of scripture, and just pondering and seeing that theme play out throughout the Bible and noticing that theme and thread. And so that theological conviction, which is something that I had written about separately in more faith formation kinds of ways, I began to think about, to use the word Robert just used, the intersection that conviction might have in our communities of faith. And one of those is just simply the initial claim that we are created in the image of God. And so began to ponder that in my own experience, and then began to try to connect that conviction with this other passion, which is intergenerational ministry. So my chapter is really an attempt to try to bring two things together: this theological conviction about scripture and this claim, image of God, and this other growing interest and passion in intergenerational ministry. So hopefully the chapter does that.
That's awesome. Actually, you know what? As I listening to both of you, I just connected two words like worship and scripture. We cannot worship without scripture. We cannot just reading scripture without bringing us to worship God. And those are so important. So in this process of writing, like, how does it impact your own vision and ministry in your context? I believe that like it might be more affirming, or maybe it's just like take you somewhere else. I don't know. Like I want to know, like, how does it impact you and your context? Robert.
Thank you. I think for me, one thing that this chapter maybe clarified was helping me install a new lens to look through as I was planning.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that writing and forming these ideas did was help me consider in everything that I'm doing, am I building stairs or am I building an obstacle for some people as they engage in worship? Or is what I'm planning a ramp to help more people be involved? And so I would say that is maybe an overarching principle as I design worship each week and I think through the worship acts. I think the way we're engaging, is this a ramp to help the whole congregation? Or is it a ramp for some and maybe a stair for other? So if that's the case, how do we design it to be a ramp that's easily accessible for everybody on a Sunday morning gathered together for corporate worship?
Yes, I really appreciate your consideration. You're not just like building something for people that you think that is useful, but you're actually taking some more consideration that how this new design is affecting others. This is not on my list, but like because of how you respond, I want to ask, like, have you ever asked like feedback and how does this ramp helping others? Is there any examples that you can share with us?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we did in including kids in our worship service, one thing we've done is we use liturgical icons, images on the screens to kind of track along with an Isaiah 6 flow of worship. One of the maybe unintended consequences of this was we have a number of folks in our congregation that are struggling with dementia and Alzheimer's, and it has significantly helped them remain more engaged in our worship services as well. So what we've done to be helpful for one specific group, we're finding that it's actually really helpful for other people. And for many others, it's been a beneficial practice. And so I think being willing to try new things, seeing how it will impact the whole congregation, and looking for opportunities, again, to better serve those we're called to serve.
I think it's such a big encouragement when you designed something and you want to help this group of people, but end up you see that it's larger scope of people that being beneficial to what you have designed for. And also, I think like what I have heard is like, it's all about invitation. You want to be inclusive and bringing people together. And I'm so glad that like it's coming together in this way. And I will use this example for my church to encourage them to use images as well. Wilson, what about you? How does this process writing impacting your own ministry in your context?
For me, I really try to pay attention to how I interact with people on a Sunday to Sunday basis. And I'm trying to be more attentive and intentional. If I have this conviction, every age and stage of life is created in the image of God, then my working assumption is that every age and stage has something of God to reflect to me. And since Robert used an image that I really liked of stairs and ramps, like I'll use an image of just a mirror and thinking about each person as a mirror who's reflecting something of God. And therefore, if I'm interacting with Henry, who's 4, or Mary, who's 84, both of whom I interacted with this last Sunday, can I be the kind of person and leader in my church who takes seriously that both of them have something of God to reflect to me? And so for me, how I carry myself Sunday to Sunday, and that's what I always talk to churches about when I work with them, is that you as a leader model something to your church. So I can model to the church, hopefully, that I'm interacting with all different ages. And that's a part of what it means. So for me, just the Sunday to Sunday, Wednesday to Wednesday, whenever we're with a community of faith, modeling that in how we treat all ages is really important to me.
That's a beautiful picture. Actually, listening to both of you, I do feel that like God is like helping us to zoom out and zoom in. Like when we look at worship and all these images and including all people, that I'm seeing like a zoom out, like a lot of people, but then like Wilson sharing bring me to zoom into everyday lives and how we interact and making an impact and allowing other people to make an impact in our lives too. And I think that is so important and also beautiful. So any particular practical tip that you want to share with us? Maybe from your book or after writing your book, so that we can all borrow from you guys. Robert, what do you think?
I think maybe the practical thing I would encourage is just your mindset as you approach worship planning. Just like you would not put a long set of stairs without handrails to get into your facility because it would make it challenging for some. Think through what you're doing and try to look at it with new eyes. And so that as you look, you consider, is this widely accessible for the people that I am helping to lead in worship each week? And so I would just encourage a mindset of continually evaluating, because so many times we maybe encounter an act each week and it's natural to us, but it might be foreign or inaccessible to others. And so being intentional to think through everything we include in a worship service to make sure that we're providing a ramp in a way for others to enter with us.
Actually, that reminds me that every intergenerational person that who is advocating this ministry, that we need to be a thinker. We can't push anything without thinking in advance. Like what your example is, like being an architect, that we have to have a plan, right?
Right.
Yeah. Wilson, what about you? Your one top of the list reminder and practical tip.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. A question that I often will give to churches and leaders that I work with is simply the question, how can I include one more generation in this? Whatever this is. And, one of the things at the conference, and I can send this out as a resource to the emails after the fact, but that to me, there's a series of questions that I think are important to ask. But that one comes to mind, which is, how can I include one more generation in this, be it worship, be it service, be it a ministry initiative, be it a gathering. And by asking that question, you form some expectations and some rhythms in the life of your church to help grow you in that direction. And yeah, I can send those out because there's several that I walk through. But to me, that's the one question that is kind of front and center. How can I include one more generation in this? And that to me typically leads to something practical, whatever the ministry or initiative is.
I don't know if you guys talk in advance, but I do see that Robert is bringing planning and organization, and then Wilson is bringing an aspect of evaluation, and how can you invite one more generation and expand the ministry or expand the concept invitation even more. I do see the beauty of how we need to think before, during, and after, and continuously to make this accessible, or this invitation continues for everyone. And thank you so much. And I wish I have more time, but I think our guest is waiting. Our next guest, back to you, Wilson.
Thanks, Amy. I'm going to take off author hat, put back on host hat, and we are going to spend a few minutes here talking with Breen and Wes. Is Wes on the call yet, Valerie? Do you know? There he is. Hey, Wes. Let me tell you a little bit about them, and then we will engage them in some questions. So a little bit about Breen first. She is an ELCA Lutheran pastor, full-time parent, and advocate for intergenerational ministry. She's been engaged in intergenerational experiments intuitively since 2005 and intentionally since 2015, and is especially interested in the gift that introducing an intergenerational framework of ministry can be to small congregations. She's a workshop leader on both intergenerational ministry and intergenerational worship, and she serves as the board president and a facilitator for the Music That Makes Community, where she practices brave shared leadership and building community through singing together. And I can say, as someone who experienced Breen and Paul this summer in their leadership, that Music That Makes Community is a great resource, and we were blessed to have them at our conference. Have a couple questions for her, but first let me tell you about Wes, who wrote a chapter called Creating Space to Taste and See the Goodness of Intergenerational Ministry. He's currently pursuing a doctorate of ministry in leadership and spiritual formation at Portland Cemetery. He's ministered in Churches of Christ in Middle Tennessee for 2 decades, with most of that time being devoted to child and family ministry. He has a BS in secondary education from Tennessee Tech and an MDiv from Lipscomb University, where he studied children's spirituality under Holly Allen. Wes lives in Cookeville, Tennessee with his wife, Stephanie, and 6 children, Haley, Cassie, Braden, Bryson, Barron, and Kerrigan. So we're really glad that both of them are here. Breen, I didn't say the name of your chapter. You wrote, Let the Spirit Lead, a framework for beginning and sustaining intergenerational faith formation. So I'm going to follow Amy's model where I'm going to ask the question and then I'll let you both answer it respectively, Breen and then Wes. So tell us a little bit about what experiences inspired you to write your chapter.
First, I just want to say Valerie, because Valerie rode me until this chapter made it to the page. So I'm really thankful for her. But in December of 2020, I stepped away from full-time ministry for the first time in 16 years. This break actually helped me to go from being in the weeds of doing intergenerational ministry to the 10,000-foot view of how we had been implementing intergenerational faith formation as a whole. I realized that I had developed a framework for introducing and sustaining intergenerational faith formation that could be repeatable in other contexts. Guided by the Holy Spirit through the chapter, we seek out the spirits of experimentation, vibrancy, teamwork, curiosity, invitation, and tenacity. And in the chapter, I walk readers through the application of this framework in a small church, because that's where I have most recently served, and is also a context that doesn't get a lot of attention by big publishing houses. However, I believe that these same spirits apply no matter the context and can be helpful for anyone seeking to introduce or sustain intergenerational faith formation.
All right, for me, the inspiration for this chapter, in 2020, I started my doctoral program at Portland Seminary, actually finished in May. So I was able to complete that. So that stage of really, for the first time in my life and career, started thinking about the leadership aspect. I had never really studied that. But then as I look back over the previous 6 or 7 years, it made me pause to evaluate, well, how did I get this ministry, the ministry I was in at the time, in a mid-sized church, about 600 or 700 folks, a lot of children. It was just a good time to go back and think about that process that we had been through, and it was a great experience for me to sit down to take some of the things that I was learning about leadership and actually reflect on those and see how those principles had been a part of what I'd been doing over the previous years, trying to build that intergenerational foundation in a church that was very age and stage segregated in most of the ministry when I started, and still is in many ways today.
Great. Thank you all for giving us a little bit of background about your story, and appreciate your work, and congrats on finishing that up in May. I want to let Wes go first, and then Breen, I'm going to ask you a question that we didn't prep you with. So I'm going to see if you can do this one off the cuff. Okay. So, and you can always choose pass, or you can phone a friend or whatever. So let's start with Wes, and then we'll go to Breen. So Wes, talk to us a little bit about the impact that you wish to bring others who are going to read your chapter. So someone reads your chapter and you want them to be changed in some way. What is the way that you would like them to be changed or impacted by your chapter? And Breen can think about if she wants to answer this while Wes answers.
Okay. So as I mentioned, I was in a pretty good sized church, 600 or 700 folks, a church with lots of college students and a vibrant campus ministry, a church that has been known for decades for its youth ministry. And again, with so much focus, as most churches do these days, on age and stage and everything being produced and focused on a small part of the demographic. That's a little bit overwhelming. And it's and I guess what I want people to know is you don't have to change the entire church, but you can just start somewhere. And that somewhere is creating that intergenerational subculture, creating those moments, building those relationships, nurturing them through events, through getting kids involved in worship in whatever ways you can. But be okay with starting small and count those wins, and know that you may not get in a larger church, you may not get everybody involved in an intergenerational setting, but know that the ones you do get involved, you are blessing richly. And so appreciate that and count those wins and find some joy and satisfaction in that.
I actually thank you for asking that question. I think the impact of a book like this is not that we put it on our shelves, but that we open it and actually read it, and then we're inspired to do something. For me, I was actually brought to the conference to represent small churches. And I live in North Platte, Nebraska, United States. And our ELCA, Lutheran Synod, even our large churches would be considered small churches by most of you all. So when I go to conferences like this, I often find I'm the only one who's representing small churches. And I think that intergenerational ministry is a superpower of small churches because there's not that many people. Everyone has to be involved in order for anything to go. And so my hope is that my chapter is encouraging to those who pastor or lead small churches that it's possible to start. It's possible to work with what you've already got. It's possible to build teams even when you're only worshiping 20 to 75 on a Sunday morning. And that it's possible to have vibrant ministry going. And that Intergenerate is the place to find more folks to partner with and to receive encouragement from.
Thank y'all. We appreciate y'all's great work and ministry and what you're doing. And thank you for sharing a little bit with us about each of your chapters. So I'm going to turn it over to Valerie.
Yeah, so we're back to ask another intergenerational gem, and Breen has volunteered to offer. Breen is someone I met doing the authorship of this book, and she is just a resource of intergenerational gems. And so she sent one to me today that she'd like to share with you all, and I think you'll appreciate it. Here you go, Breen.
What I want to share with you as an intergenerational gem today is that let's try and experiment is a magical phrase. If you want to try something new and frame it as an experiment, I've found that it both opens hearts and also lowers the stakes. First, an experiment by its very nature doesn't last forever, which means that those who are more naturally resistant to change might just be willing to give it a try. Second, it means that we are going in knowing that we don't have all the answers. So it gives us permission to tweak and change as we go, and also permission to say that an experiment has failed, that we have learned from it, and that it's time to put it down and try something else. One caveat I have for you in using this experimentation language is if you're going to tell people that you're starting an experiment, please mean it. Don't use it as a sneaky way to try to start a new program that you intend will continue until the Lord calls us home. So that's my gem for you today. Let's try an experiment.
Yes. And Breen talks about experimentation and the gifts of experimentation and curiosity in her chapter. And they've really shaped how I think about a practice mindset in a lot of the things that I'm doing for the future. So hopefully you'll check out her chapter and check out this idea of experimentation throughout her chapter. Thank you, Breen. At this time, we're going to hand it over to Bjorn because we need to give away another free book.
Alrighty, before I get started, I just wanted to mention that Melanie Cave, since the other person who won the wheel was not here, you got the free book.
Yay, thank you.
Alrighty, let's spin the wheel. Alrighty, Ruth. Please send us your email so that we can hook you up with a free book.
All right, thank you, Bjorn, and congratulations. At this time, we are going on to Amy, who is going to be interviewing Elizabeth Tamez Mendez and also Johanna Myers.
Thank you, Valerie, and great to meet with you, Johanna and Elizabeth. And now is a ladies' night. I mean, like afternoon, whatever. And you can see from the screen. I'm going to introduce Elizabeth first, and she contributed chapter 15 and being familiar, Latino intergenerational connections, honoring our generational and cultural treasures. You know, I'm actually paying attention to this chapter because I'm from the trilingual church, trilingual culture church, and I feel that this is like so helpful. So Elizabeth is the founder and executive director of New Generation 3, NG3. Since 2005, NG3 is dedicated to training leaders, conducting research, and providing consulting services in the US and abroad. Through her work as PhD in leadership, Elizabeth merges her passion for seeing youth thrive, the lessons from her 30 years of global ministry experience. Her commitment to developing practical resources centers on bridging the world of academia with the needs of practitioners in multicultural settings. In their upcoming book series, Gentles, 6 transformational practices of Latino churches and youth through stories, research insights, and reflection questions. Readers have a guided space to consider easy to integrate ministry and leadership practices that foster healthy intergenerational relationship in the church. That is so awesome. And Johanna Myers contributed chapter 4, Apprenticing Faith Together, helping adults to understand discipleship and the role in intergenerational community. And also co-author along with Roberta Jade Agler, chapter 9, Growing Faith in Messy Church. And she's the associate director for Messy Church USA, as well as director of Disciples Formation and Aldersgate United Methodist Church in Grandview. Her time at Divinity School helped shape her call to disciple formation for all ages. She introduced Messy Church to her congregation in 2013, starting what has become a fabulous messy journey into intergenerational ministry. In 2019, Johanna completed her Doctor of Ministry degree through Wesley Theological Seminary. Her doctoral project focused on intergenerational hands-on faith formation in small groups, using the foundational values of Messy Church as a rule of life. And you know what, Johanna, Messy Church it's great. Great in a way that like it's a reality. And I introduced Messy Church concept to my church, and then I said, have you ever read the book Messy Church? And then like some of our leaders respond and say, are you saying SEBC, which is my church? And I like people will feel that like all churches are messy. Thank you for introducing that. Elizabeth and Johanna, there's no order, but if you feel free that you want to speak first, just click unmute. But what insights that you had to inspire you to write this chapter?
Well, so my chapter was based out of my doctoral research and doctoral project, and was an opportunity to kind of step back and reflect on the things that worked and the things that maybe were a bit more of a struggle. So kind of out of that idea of frustration. We did a year-long program of intergenerational small groups, and it was wonderful. Everybody kind of came out of it just really excited. But I noticed that kind of some areas of frustration, particularly with the adults. And I realized how it was very easy to get everybody to understand why intergenerational ministry was so important for our children and for our youth. The adults could wrap their head around that. Yes, this is important for them. And they could even understand why that their leader would be asking them to kind of help out with the children and youth. Where they were really struggling was understanding why intergenerational ministry, intergenerational disciple formation was important actually for them as adults, that their discipleship was dependent upon the presence of youth and children in their midst. And so this is kind of that question of, how to communicate with adults. So my chapter is kind of answering that question of, I know my why, but how do I communicate that why with the adults in my congregation?
That is awesome. And a lot of times the caregivers do not remember that they also can receive care from other generation or even younger generation as well. Elizabeth, what do you think? And tell us more about your chapter, your inspiration, and your insight.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. This chapter is really a love letter to the community that taught me what it means to do IG ministry, and to all the marginalized communities who are learning to lean into their voices and reclaiming what is already organically happening in our communities. So for me, it's exciting, right? Because now we get to highlight the voices of others and give an opportunity to the larger church and academia that needs to learn from what is happening in our communities and what is just our everyday way of doing ministry, worshiping, family, and living with one another. And so chapter 15 just offers a little glimpse into our journey within a vibrant Latino congregation in Texas, and how we transform our church from the inherited models that were age segregated and not connecting with our realities or our ways of life into what really made sense, which is intergenerational faith community that is aligning with our cultural values and generational treasures. And as a congregation, we were just rich with energy and enthusiasm, and we began to recognize that our youth made up the majority of our community, and that was just mirroring the demographic trends in the Hispanic population within the United States. And with this realization, we embarked on a mission to make our church more inclusive and relevant for all generations. We have an issue with adult-centric views, and this was now the flipping of the narrative into how do we then give power and voice to all ages. And so we really understood that nurturing our cultural values, traditions, and familial bonds was essential. The transformation process involved understanding developmental theories. So you're going to see that in the chapter. You're also going to see a lot of our theological foundations, which are new voices that you perhaps have not heard about in the past, and the importance of bringing in positive youth development theory. And so we, during this process, transition our age-segregated ministries to intergenerational collaboration and interdependence. And this transition really marked a shift from our ministry models, aligning them with our values and our deep commitment to family, which played a central role in this transformation. And by making youth active contributors to our faith community, we empower them to grow in their identity as co-creators of their destiny in a society that tells them that they don't have a voice, that they're invisible, and that they have to submit to a system that does not recognize them. On the other hand, we also honor our elders in recognizing their wisdom. That is something from our tradition, making sure that our elders are centered and not disregarded, or that their voice no longer counts. And so actively involving them with the next generation just heighten their renewed purpose for guiding and nurturing the younger generation, especially those whose grandparents and extended family were left behind in other countries. And now they were empowered to pass on the faith to this generation. So our stories just illustrate how intergenerational collaboration can bring about transformation, leading to renewal and the flourishing of a more vibrant and connected faith community, all while drawing from its own ethnocultural values.
Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. You know what? I really appreciate how much you see in this, and the word that I heard is a realization of something, and it's like awakening or enlightenment. And I think for all of us that we wanted to share something, must be something that God inspired us, put it in my heart. And I encourage you should have expand your chapter into a book. You have so much to offer to us. And Johannah, back to you. Actually, I am changing a bit of my second question, the impact for your ministry context. Do you have examples that you can share with us? Because I read Messy Church books. I read Messy Church Discipleship, and literally actually all the books that are available, I skimmed through, and I really appreciate the work that Messy Church has been doing. In this process, writing your chapter, how does it impact your context? Or is there any examples that you can tell us, stories to share with us?
Sure. So for me, thinking not just from kind of a national perspective with Messy Church USA, but from a very local perspective, we started with Messy Church in 2013. So we're in year 11 of doing Messy Church. And I think Wes kind of touched on this earlier, starting in the spaces where you can and growing from there. And maybe it doesn't reach everyone immediately, but it begins to kind of plant seeds. And so we were able, after years of kind of working and building relationships through Messy Church, it led to that ability to do kind of intergenerational small groups, and move toward kind of that as an additional model. Now we're working on a model of intergenerational Sunday school, and kind of adding to that. And it's, coming back to being able to explain why this is important, and why this is, I think particularly post-COVID, why intergenerational ministry actually fills some of the frustrations and things that maybe churches had kind of coming out of COVID, that starting small and kind of building those relationships has allowed us to grow. And so Messy Church offers a model that has been successful in places across the world. I mean, not just in the US, not just in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, you name it, it's kind of grown from there. And so it's a model that is very adaptable in any context, small church, large church, wherever. But that idea of kind of starting and communicating with one group, and then kind of growing and adding from there.
I really appreciate the word intergenerational small group and intergenerational Sunday school. And a lot of curriculums are written for grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. And I think we have segregate or break it down too small to predetermine people's learning. But intergenerationally, we can enrich each other's life so much. And thank you for being an advocate for that. And that's encouraging. Elizabeth, what impact do you wish to bring to others who are going to read your book or chapter?
Prophetic words. Thank you, Amy. The book. Yes, those book contracts. Because really, with this chapter, it's a little glimpse and an opening into new ways of learning and looking at what it is that we're doing, right? And so I know that we have right now participants from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, certainly throughout Europe and the United States. Our world has been uplifting now, not enough yet, but the voices of those indigenous groups who have been doing faith and spirituality and church in very different ways. And so with this chapter, that is one of the goals, is to encourage others to honor their cultural and generational treasures, their perspectives, and their ways of life to inform their ministerial practices, and to really lean in and acknowledge the uniqueness that each context has, while emphasizing the importance of cultivating intergenerational connections. And I think, as Breen was mentioning, even in smaller churches, right, rural churches, we see these nuances and differences. And chapter 15 is really applicable outside of those who may think that their church may not be multi-ethnic and multicultural, but the reality is that if you start looking outside your community and the doors of your church, more than likely you're going to start noticing that there is already a lot of this happening, and it's just not inside perhaps your paradigm or your church. So with that, we want to encourage each other to continue learning from one another, and we want to share our experience through the 4 distinctive phases, which were discovery, design, transformation, and that transition period. And so I believe that that really translates to different contexts, and especially as we're talking today, right? Like, what are some of those practical nuggets? How do we go about doing this? And Valerie did a beautiful job through the editorial to say, this is what I'm seeing. This is how everything is emerging, right? And so I really thank her for her beautiful work. And so with this chapter, we just really want to prompt our general exploration and ask each other and ask ourselves and ask our faith community, how might your congregation create more opportunities to build closer intergenerational relationships and be familia, which is the Spanish word for family. And you're going to notice that we included Spanish words throughout on purpose to help this center that experience of, wait, I don't know this, let me go look it up, and become just very curious about that. And that's the work that we do at NG3, uplifting these voices and the theological perspectives from other points and bringing in that learning into the general church and academia so that we can continue to learn from one another and grow together.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I really like how you bring out the honoring cultural values, because a lot of the time when we are bringing people together, we wanted to bring people together, but like it seems to be like we're taking away some of the stuff like from other people's preferences or other people's practices. But in fact, we want to honor each other and honor the tradition and the cultural values. It will just take a long time for us to do this work, but Johannah, our time is running out, but I still want to hear from you. I'm sorry, I'm just taking my executive decision. That I want to hear from you what you want the people to know as they're reading your chapter, or if you have one practical tips that you can offer for us. Since messy church theory is like so profound and trying to help us to inspire us to practice intergenerational to include youth and children. What one particular tip that you want to offer to us?
I would say it's important for you to know your why, but it's also important for you to communicate that why to your congregation. It's not enough for you to know it and kind of hold it. You've got to actually communicate it. Why intergenerational ministry, why this model, why messy church or whatever model for intergenerational ministry you might be experimenting with.
Wow, thank you. It's a very concise and important message, because I believe Gareth, in our first interview, he mentioned about like selling it, right? But like when we sell it, we have to tell why, explain clearly. Otherwise, like we cannot get the buy-in. Thank you so much, Valerie. Wilson, back to you and for our next set of guests. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Johannah.
Thank you, Johannah and Elizabeth. You've truly changed how I think about a lot of things from your chapter. So I hope that the rest of you will get to benefit from their wisdom and experiences. At this point, I would like to call forward Tammy, Preston, and Rachel Sangster. We are so glad they're here from Intergenerate Australia, but they are not actually in Australia right now. They're actually in Cambodia, and it's late at night there. And I'm so grateful for them. First of all, they are friends. I got to be in a cohort with Tammy and Rachel, so I have benefited from so much of their wisdom and leadership in the past and now too. And I'm just grateful for your support to be here today. And Tammy is working to get the book on the website for Intergenerate. They've put a link in there so that people from Australia can order the book at a cheaper rate, so we don't have to pay for shipping. And so that will be on the resource page. My son Bjorn is going to keep posting that link in just so that you have that. But I wanted to just introduce Rachel and Tammy quickly, and they are going to share with us intergenerational gems as well today. Rachel Sangster is both Rachel and Tammy are members of Intergenerate Australia, obviously. Rachel is co-pastor, and I'm not sure how to say this name. Is it Riccarton? I'm not sure if I'm saying that. Riccarton Baptist Church in Christchurch, New Zealand. And she's also a children and family ministry coach and the Upper South Island Baptist Association. And Tammy Preston, we know she was the keynote speaker at our 2023 conference, and she is a founding pastor of an intergenerational creative arts community in Australia. She's actively involved in intergenerational ministry on this bio, it says for over 33 years, but it's probably maybe even longer now. And she's a trained teacher, has a degree in theology from ACOM, and is currently doing PhD work in intergenerational ministry at Cardiff University in Wales, which she presented also at Intergenerate. And I'm looking forward to seeing more written about that in the future. So we just welcome you, Rachel and Tammy, here today, and offer up intergenerational gems for our community here.
Well, there's already been so much, and it's been very full these last what is it, an hour and a half nearly. And we at Intergenerate in Australia and New Zealand, we really want to support this book. The All Ages Becoming it is full of gems, really, seriously, and I would highly encourage it. I think the All Ages Becoming, this kind of ... open-ended journey, I love the title of it. And when within the thesis that I've and the doctorate studies I've been doing in the last 4 years, this for me, I suppose one of the gems that comes up is that I know we value individuals, and we know that we want to honor everyone being unique and valuable. But what if we flipped that a little bit in terms of a lens, and our focus would be more about celebrating the things that actually join us together, that things that actually that are similar. And so in my studies through just interviewing people from 5 to 95, what I found is that sense of belonging and the need to belong and the desire to belong was actually the same for all ages. And for me, that was a pretty key piece to go, well, if we're going to actually focus on what is joining us together, what is similar, what the journey we're all going on, and the fact is that everyone, whether they were young or old, was saying small groups, being known, serving and having friendships and having a voice and caring and feeling like a family, that those elements were the same for all ages. And if we're actually looking through that lens of what actually is the same and what can we celebrate, then I actually think that changes. It's a real challenge to change what we do and why we do what we do, and how we lead and what should be our focus. Because for me, the desire would be, how can we look at people all ages being human rather than segregating and claiming their ages, and while understanding that there's individuality there and we want to honor that, but actually there's much more that we journey together and celebrate. So when in our faith community, that's been our question, and it's changed the way we do things, because we actually see each other as fellow journey is walking on the journey together. And to me, that just changes my focus. It changes the way we lead. It changes what we do. It changes how we meet. It changes the priorities. And so, for me, that's been a personal gem, but I've seen it through the research that many others feel the same way. Do you want to add to that?
Well, I want to agree first that there have already been so many gems. And I just wanted to pick up on a couple of them actually, and pick up on one that you just said. When you say lens, I think of posture. And Wilson said something about posture way back at the beginning about an hour ago. And the posture that I feel as a leader in an intergenerational ministry, I'm settling on the word surrender at the moment, but I don't know if that is the all-encompassing word yet. But for me at the moment, it's a posture of surrender. It's a posture of letting go of control. And I want to pick up on what Breen said before too about just about giving it a go. And my team on a Sunday morning have a little joke with me now, because every time I would come to them for our pre-service meeting and prayer, I'd say, right, team, we're doing something different this week. So now they all say to me the same thing rather than, and so it's just giving something a go, experimenting, and trying something different, and just letting go of the reins a little bit and not being scared to do that is a posture that I believe is a good posture for a leader of an intergenerational ministry to have.
Thank you both so much for these gems. They're absolutely wonderful, and thank you for your support of our book, and thank you just for all that you do for intergenerational ministry. I'm so grateful to be a part of the intergenerational family and know both of you. At this point, we are almost out of time, and I don't want to go without giving away our last book. So Bjorn, would you give us our book away?
All right, let's spin the wheel. All right. It looks like, Karen, you have won a free book. Please send me your email so we can hook you up.
And thank you, Bjorn, for spinning the wheel. We'll be spinning the wheel 3 more times this evening. If any of you want to join us, or afternoon, or whatever it is, wherever you're at, for our second session. We are ending our time together. And first of all, I just want to say thank you, community, for coming to support this launch of this book and spreading the word about this new book. We appreciate all of your voices in this community. I just told my son, make sure you save all the chat, because I see wonderful gems all just around in the community. So I'm thankful for that. And Wilson and Amy, would you want to say any final words? And then Linda and I have prepared just a way to end and bless you all as we continue, and a blessing for the book as it continues to be read and used by others in communities.
I just want to invite everyone to come back for the other session, because we're going to interview the other authors. So yeah, come back and stay up all night if you can.
Yeah, I don't have anything to say except that we have had an amazing support team making this whole thing happen. Valerie invited her children to come and be a part to help make this happen, and that could not have done it without them. So Bjorn and Promise Rose, and who else helped with us, Valerie?
And Pastor Fabian, thank you so much. And all the church from Amy's church at SBC is hosting with the Zoom. We're so grateful for all of them and all that they have done to help support this. And I'm so thankful for the Intergenerate team. I had no idea how to do a book launch, y'all. So this has been really great. I had no idea it could be this wonderful. And my team asked if they could help host that. And so I'm so thankful for the team at Intergenerate. So at this time, I'm going to have Linda bookend what she calls bookending in her book. It's a practice that I've been learning through her, and I still don't know if I have quite figured out, but I'm watching her and learning to do this in my communities. And so she's going to do it on screen, knowing it's an experiment, just like we talked about. And then I'm going to pray a blessing over us as we end, and then we'll be ending. You can feel free to stay on for a little bit, but and converse, but we'll be ending after this.
Thank you, Valerie. Yes, this is an experiment. But first, Bjorn, I need to talk with you before tonight, because watching the technology you have, I think we could come up with a way to do this in a really cool on-screen way. So I'll talk to you and we'll experiment now, and then we'll see what we can come up with for tonight. But this whole idea of the title of the book is Circle of Blessing. And I have found that when we actually put people into a physical circle, it changes the way we see one another, that we can see how God is present from the youngest to the oldest, and that God shows up in every generation. But for our time, rather than actually naming the generations and saying, which generation are you part of? Sometimes it's just quicker to call out the decades. And so you can either, at the bottom of your screen, you have reactions, and you can choose to quote on Zoom, raise your hand. But if you can't find that or don't have that as part of your Zoom technology, you can physically raise your hand. So yes, as you already know, I am age 75. And looking on the screen, I may be the oldest, I don't know. But is there anyone else on this here, part of our party, that's in their 70s? Raise your hand or give a shout out. Bjorn, do you see anybody else raising their hand?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure that I'm the wisest, but I am in my 70s. That may make me the oldest, because normally I would say we would crown that person and say, you are the oldest, and for our time together, you are also the wisest today. Who is the youngest? And I would guess that's maybe part of Valerie's family. Yes, okay, we have Promise Rose, who is our youngest. Do you mind sharing with us your age?
I'm 14.
Yay, thank you for being part of our circle today. And so we celebrate and we think about, I would love to get to know you, but thank you for coming and assisting and bringing your gifts. That's one of the things that we acknowledge, is that every generation brings a gift. If you are in your 60s, do we have anyone in their 60s? Would you raise your hand physically or via Zoom? And Bjorn, can you report, do we have anyone joining us in their 60s?
Not that I can see.
Okay, so they're out being busy doing other things. So 50s, how about in our 50s? Yay, I see one hand going up. Keep your hand up so Bjorn can count. What do you see?
I see 2.
Okay, 40s. Hands up, keep them up until you've been counted. Yay, I see lots of hands waving. We won't even count. We know that we have people in their 40s. Yay, how about their 30s? Hands up. Oh yes, I see Scooter and Grace. I see some others. Thank you. How about in their 20s? Robert, I see Robert. How about anyone else in their 20s? And we already know that we have some teens, and I would guess that possibly in your homes or at least in your congregation's homes, you have those that are 10 and younger. If you can imagine that we are joining hands, that we're in this circle and we celebrate God's presence, and those that have come before us, the saints that have blessed us, and those that will come after us, as we celebrate God's presence showing up in every generation, and giving thanks for not only our cultures that are represented here, but the countries and the decades and generations.
Thank you, Linda. And as we practice celebrating generations, I would just like to read the blessing that I have been praying over our authors ever since the book began. And now I pray it as the book is read and used in other communities. This is from Philippians 1:3-6, the Message. Every time you cross my mind, I break out in exclamations of thanks to God. Each exclamation is a trigger to prayer. I find myself praying for you with a glad heart. I am so pleased that you have continued on in this with us, believing and proclaiming God's message. From the day you heard it right up to the present, there has never been the slightest doubt in my mind that the God who started this great work in you would keep at it and bring it to a flourishing finish on the very day Christ Jesus appears. Blessings to you all, and thank you so much for your support of this book today.